Welcome to the LowCarbUSA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine.
Dr. Tony Hampton, Dr. Brian Lenske has suggested that I talk to you. He was really excited after he had a discussion or an interview with you. And to be honest, I hadn't actually heard about you at all.
Sure.
But then I started to look you up and see what you were about, and what obviously interests us is that you are talking about what we are all about, and that is addressing diabetes and metabolic syndrome with dietary and lifestyle changes.
Yes.
So maybe to start with, tell us your story, how you became aware of this, how you changed, and how it's working for the patients that you're starting to take this to.
Okay, well, thank you for that, again. I think I'll just kind of, being a person of color, African-American, and I know we're in a pandemic for COVID-19 right now. We have a pandemic of inequities. But I just want to say that we also have a pandemic of chronic disease, and that's a pandemic too. And so for me, it was a matter of, it's almost like we got a knee on our patients, holding them down from healing because we are managing our diseases with medication and not learning how to heal them. So we have to, so to me, that pandemic will kill, I think, heart disease. 1 million people a month in the world are dying from heart disease. So we have to learn how to manage those pandemics. That's number one. Number two, so I had a family member who got ill and it ended up being diabetes. And this is a family member who was a professional as well. So they understood the ramifications of a diabetes diagnosis. And so in my brain, well, I'm a doctor, I've been traditionally trained, so let me say to her all the things that she needs to know so she can manage her disease and get it under control. But what she said to me was, I'm not sure I want to be a pincushion. I'm not sure I want to take all these medicines, and I certainly don't want to pay those costs. So, and then what really blew my mind when I started doing research is that I thought about those studies like the ADVANCE study, the ACCORD study, et cetera. And you do all this to control the blood sugars, and yet you don't prevent heart attack or stroke. So she knew that, I knew that, and so it was a very frustrating thing. So but before I got into this whole low carb, high fat space, I was a vegetarian for about 8 years or so. And my goal was to do research for my family member that would allow me to take the vegetarian to another level that'll work on diabetes. So I knew about the Dean Ornishes and the Esselsteins and the, McDougals of the world. I knew about these guys, and I had never questioned anything they said, right? So anyways, I started doing my research, and I look at this A to Z study. I think that was at Stanford, the SHI study. I looked at these studies and I'm like, why is the low carb diet beating this vegetarian diet? And it just kind of blew my mind. And I was like, that doesn't make sense, particularly for Atkins. It just didn't sound healthy in my brain. So my first revelation was the low carb, high fat diet has better outcomes than the diet that I've been following all these years. The second revelation is that if I help my family member just control their blood sugars based on those studies, then they're not really necessarily going to prevent the heart disease and the stroke. So in my brain, are we really treating the real disease? And then I discovered that we weren't, that, controlling the blood sugars is controlling the symptom. And I didn't realize that the glucose was a symptom, and that the real disease was insulin resistance. And then after I realized it was insulin resistance, I learned that the only way to fix that is lifestyle, and the best diet for that is probably one that reduces the things that stimulate insulin. And then even beyond that, as I thought about all my other patients, this ideal of all these other diseases are related to insulin resistance as well. So like hypertension, and I learned that the inflammation causes hypertension, not the salt and the cholesterol. That just blew my mind, right? And then I tried the low carb, high fat personally, and I wasn't overweight. For those who can see me, I'm not an overweight guy. But what I learned is that all of a sudden, my mental clarity got better. All of a sudden, my energy, and I literally would fall asleep at the light on the way home on a regular basis. And then I would have to, because I was a vegetarian, I would constantly have to eat. I'm not really having to eat anymore. So as I learned what I needed to learn from my family member, I started to document that journey. And that led to me writing my first book, Fix Your Diet, Fix Your Diabetes. And that was like a way for me to, and it really wasn't about, it was really about how do I help my patients? How do I educate them in 15 minutes? I have 15-minute and 20-minute, 15 and 30-minute appointments. So, and I needed some resources that I could give them. So I started writing and I started doing other things. And then I got lucky because when I did that research and wrote the book, I literally learned more on YouTube than I did in my training. And but then I discovered the College of Obesity Medicine. And I was like, wait a minute, these guys are saying the same thing. It kind of shocked me because everybody else was saying low fat. And I learned about like the women's health studies and how when people just reduce calories, they may lose weight initially, but it's not sustainable because I think the women's health study is about at least 10 years, they didn't really lose weight, maybe a pound or two. But what they found is that the ghrelin hormone, the hunger hormone, is gonna go up when you reduce calories, unlike fasting, which will, and then it'll slow your metabolic rate. And so what happens is all this hard work of trying to lose weight and you're unsuccessful because your body's going to fight against it. But instead of us recognizing that, we demonize the person for not working hard enough. You didn't work hard enough. Or as a doctor, I got you on an antihistamine, which will make you gain weight. Before I studied with the College of Obesity Medicine, I did not know that an antihistamine caused weight gain. I just didn't know. I didn't know a beta blocker caused weight gain. I had to learn that. And it was through those types of learnings that I had the confidence not only I'm in a large health system, Advocate. Aurora Health is the 9th largest health system in the country. So it's very structured and, we follow guidelines and try to live up to those expectations. But I promise you, this knowledge of just being willing to say, I'm going to try something different. And then I got lucky and found Tim Noakes. And I'm like, wait a minute, Tim Noakes is teaching us how to do low carb in the clinic. Let me turn my phone off. And I was just so impressed with the fact that now we have people in the world, all the way in South Africa, who is going to help me in my journey. And then I'm still learning because I'm in training for nutrition. So I'm in University of Western States. They teach nutrition and functional medicine. And so I'm actually using that as a way to add to what I already know. And so what's happening is, as I learn, I teach. I learn from you and what you're doing with LowCarbUSA. I learn from how, maybe Dr. Chen Berry does this thing on YouTube. I learn from people I see on Twitter, like Dr. Andy Fung, the other Fung that's, out there. And I'm learning from people who have given me the courage to see the world through a different lens. And so that's where I'm at now. I'm at this point where I'm just trying to recognize that people, they lack knowledge, and because they lack knowledge, they suffer when they don't have to. So I think we have literally a duty to educate as many people as possible who are willing to try this path. And I just say to my clinical colleagues, my patients who are mine, or just anybody that's listening, there's an opportunity to heal. And it doesn't come from medicine. Typically, it comes from those other things you have to do. And I think nutrition and maybe how you think are probably the most critical to achieve those goals. So that's kind of where I'm at and how I got here. I've been doing this for about 5 years. Prior to that, I think I'm a good doctor. I just didn't know exactly what the best approach was until a family member got sick, you know, and then that just personalized it and made me want to get a little deeper. And when I dove a little deeper, that's how I ended up in this space. So it's been pretty eye-opening. And I learned something literally when I finish our conversation. I'll be studying for a test for my functional medicine and nutrition. And so all this learning, like for example, I got to review, you know, oxidative stress and free radicals and how, you know, electrons, you know, a couple of double bonded electrons break off and they turn into a free radical. And then the free radical is looking for another electron, and then it has to find another cell. And as it looks for all these different cells, it causes oxidative stress, which is the equivalent to rust or an apple that's, you know, turning brown. And all of that, so it's really inflammation and oxidative stress that's killing us. And the things that prevent that are very simple. How am I eating? Am I exercising? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I reducing my stress? Am I thinking positively? Am I in a dysfunctional relationship? Am I exposing myself to pollutants? Am I emotionally unstable and depressed and anxious? Are my life experiences such that it doesn't serve me anymore because I'm doing things that are harmful? For example, in the communities of color, I like cornbread on my greens. Well, I don't eat cornbread on my greens anymore because I realized that grain, that flour, that cornmeal or whatever it's made of is not good for my body. But my belief system is that you can't eat greens without cornbread. So I had to learn.
Because that's how you were brought up, right? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're really, and we have a big responsibility to not just teach people, but to coach them. We have to learn coaches.
Yeah.
And I learned that from, we have a lean, they don't call it lean in our system, but I was the medical director of the Advocate Operating System, and they talk about that Toyota business model lean, you know, process improvement. And it talks about how coaching your team is how you don't just teach them, you have to coach them. Yeah. Because what happens after that visit is going to determine if the patient's successful.
Well, that's something, it's kind of fortuitous, I suppose, that you brought that up right now, because we literally are in the process of launching a coaching program right now. One of our vendors at a previous event came to us and said, listen, we would like to partner with you. And so we have now a certified course where they include, where you get tied up with or associated with a personal coach. And then they teach you about the ketogenic diet and how to do it, and they help you along the way, introduce exercise. They also focus on stress and sleep and all those other factors. I'm really pleased that you mentioned that, because in our environment, so often people just talk about the diet.
That's right.
And yes, that's really important, but it's just a piece of the puzzle. And unless you embrace all the other factors as well of improving your lifestyle, just the diet change alone often doesn't help, or it does some help, but it's not as good as it could be if you know, if you incorporate all these other features.
Yeah, you have to do it. It's the foundation. You can't like tell people, I want you to get off of a narcotic, hydrocodone, for example, that kills 30 or 40,000 a year, but then you don't have a program for them when you get them off of it. You can't just stop filling the prescription. You have to, and then you have to say, well, why am I on a narcotic? What's the root cause of your pain? Or are you when you go home, is it painful to go home because the marriage is so dysfunctional, right? And so if we have a diabetic in front of us, or a person that's struggling with their weight, and I hate morbid obesity, I promise I do. I hate those terms, but if we have that in front of us and we don't ask that person that's struggling with their weight, what's going on with the relationship, we have not served them, you know? And so what I want to do in my health system is to help in fact, I will be meeting with some leaders within my organization soon, just to talk about our motto is we help people live well. So the question is, what does that look like? And what I'm going to say to them is that live well is not just about managing the disease and doing a good job there. It's really about how do we heal people and help them to return to a state where their body's functioning normally. And that requires knowing about the relationships and those other factors.
Right.
So I think with you guys, the coaching, if Serena Williams can have a coach and Tiger Woods, why not us, right? We need coaches in leadership. We need coaches in marriage. Everybody should probably have somebody that they're talking about their marriage with. So all of these things require, can I think outside the box or have a third party provide perspective and just guide us a little bit and push us and challenge us. Like, that's the hard part about coaching. I need to be challenged. I need to be pushed just enough where it's uncomfortable, but yet it's not so uncomfortable that I'm going to go back to what I normally do. Like, just enough challenge to make me better than I was before I interacted with that coach. And that's what a good coach will never just tell you what to do. A good coach will say, okay, let's try this out. And then I want you to go out there and try it out. And then you come back, we'll look at it, and then we'll reevaluate it. We'll look at where we have gaps, and we'll try it again. It's like an experiment, and it's like a pilot. So there's a way to incorporate these things into relationships, into how you work at work, how you deal with patients, and it just makes you a better person, because this is a continuous learning process. And none of us have the answers. I don't have the answers. You don't have the answers. We're still trying to figure it out. We do have an idea that what we're talking about works, because we can't tell you 50 years from now necessarily, although you can go to the historic aspect of it and say you can, but let's just talk about science. I can't promise you that 50 years from now, there may be an issue with a low carb, high fat diet, but what I can promise you, you'll be off your medicines in a year if you do this. Like, I can guarantee you your metabolic profile is going to get better. You're going to probably be off medicines. And if that's true, that's a pretty safe bet. And you're going to feel good, and so let's try that bet, because if I talk to professionals who are advising people and they're not metabolically healthy themselves, that's a tough sell too. I need you to convince me. And that's what I try to do. I try to live what I preach and teach, and with the hope that maybe I can change a few lives along the way.
And actually that came up, Dr. Tro Kalajian, who's the other partner of Brian Lenskes in their very successful Low Carb MD podcast. But I did an interview with him for my podcast. And I remember looking up some stuff on him before I got on with him. And he had some before and after pictures and that, and if you look at his before pictures, it is shocking. Yeah. And he's there in his doctor's white coat with his stethoscope around his neck, and he is massive. And in the interview, I even said to him, Tro, like, with all due respect, if I was someone who was looking for advice on my health, and I had to look at you, why would I listen to the old you, right? Because the new Tro is just this lean, mean running machine. I mean, he's incredible. But he was and then that picture of him is almost like the caricature of a doctor. Is like this round, plump guy with a stethoscope around his neck. That is it. If you look at cartoons and stuff, and it makes you realize that these guys they're not healthy themselves. A lot of them, or the majority of them even.
That's because the things that lead to that, stress, that's a doctor. Lack of sleep, that's a doctor. Never getting a lunch break and eating a decent meal. When I finish with you, I'm going to make a smoothie. In fact, I don't have it made yet, but I'll be making a smoothie in here. And the reason why you have to be careful with smoothies, but it's going to have avocado, coconut oil. It may have a few berries, some spinach or kale, cucumber. That's my workaround if I'm busy. I'll make a smoothie and have it at the office. But the docs are just following the guidelines. The nutrition professional who's overweight, they're following the guidelines. You need balance, you need low fat. So the pharmacists, they're following it. So it's really not their fault that we got 2 weeks of nutrition in medical school or professional schools of any kind. It's not their fault. And even, this is the funny thing, even as I work with the University of Western States, because I've done this research myself, sometimes I'll read something that's in their text and they'll say, caution with saturated fat. The good news is I can look at that and I can question my professor. Because one of the things I want anybody listening to do, you have to be skeptical, even of us. Always have a questioning mind, always want to know more, always don't just trust blindly. But what you'll find is when you try some of these approaches, it'll work. So I think for all of those people who have not had success, they just weren't given a path that will lead them to success. So
no, and and you mentioned that you guys literally get 2 weeks of nutrition education in your whole thing. Yeah. So it's not really your fault. And that's why you talked about always wanting to learn and all of that. And I often joke with a lot of the doctors that are converted is that they should have been engineers, because they are the ones that actually look at something and say, hey, but wait a minute, this is not working. Why not maybe do some more investigation? And most of them have had to try it on themselves and see that it works. And then only will they then consider taking it to their patients.
That's right. It's risky to.
They never get taught that in medical school.
You're not trained to think. You're right. I mean, I say this with respect. I mean, it's almost like when I took physiology and I had to figure out how the heart worked, and the kidney stuff was really hard for me. But it was like common sense didn't always make sense with some of those physiologic functions. So we were kind of trained to, this is how it works. And we were and you need to follow that principle.
Right.
We weren't really taught to question things. We may have been taught in statistics class to know how to read data to see how good it is, and is it a double-blind study, blah, blah, blah. But what happens when people leave that space, they don't even question the data. What they do is they hear a headline just like the patient. Like, I'm gonna do a video this weekend and talk about metformin a little bit. And what they do is they look at the headline and they basically are saying what the patient would say. They don't look at, well, who sponsored the study? How well done was it? They don't look at any of that because they're too busy to do that. And the funny thing is that it seems like the organizations that give us recommendations, you almost feel like they don't even, that's why I like Nina, who wrote the Big Fat Surprise, I think.
Yeah, Big Fat Surprise, that's right.
Yeah, so we need to question stuff. And what she did as a journalist, she said, you know what, this is not quite right. And she questioned it, and she did her research and found, this is not really making sense. So if we can get our clinicians back, and our patients, and just anybody listening, question things. When you see a headline that's contradictory, one day coffee's good, the next day it's bad. One day meat is good, the next day it's bad. When you see that contradiction, start asking, so, what else do I need to know about? Who sponsored that study? Is there a bias that's built into that study? And then if there is, at the minimum, you need to at least know that. Now, if you decide based on that bias it's still legit, that's fine. But if you don't know that bias and then you believe it, then you really set yourself up for kind of being hoodwinked into something that doesn't make sense. And we only got one life, and I'm not sure how long I'll be on this planet. But I don't want to leave this planet early because of lack of knowledge. It would just be, and my family can't be with me, and my community can't be with me, my patients don't benefit from hearing these kind of conversations. And so all I'm trying to do with my patients is to say, this is your current state. We're not happy with that. You're not happy with that. Here's an ideal state. Maybe we get a picture when they were 18 and they were happy with their health at that point. We have a gap between those two things. So let's figure out how we can lay down bricks to help you get to your goal. And we're not going to build a house. We're just going to lay a brick. And if you lay a brick, you're successful. And the next day we're going to lay another brick. And the next day we're going to lay another brick. And that's kind of how I frame things with patients, so that they don't feel overwhelmed and they don't feel like you're just taking stuff away. And then I keep it simple. I go to where they are. And if they like certain things, I say, that's why every patient, so what do you typically eat? I ask every visit if I'm, not focused on some acute issue. And then they'll tell me, I'll say, okay, so what one thing are you willing give up. These are the 3 things you just mentioned that I'm concerned about. Which one? And then we'll see them in 3 months, and they'll tell me, oh yeah, doc, I was able to give up the you know, the bagel in the morning. And then, okay, so let's talk some more about what you're doing. And then the funny thing about it, for a lot of people, it may just be 1 or 2 or 3 things that's really making their journey difficult. It could be soda, and then they get rid of those few, or they may not know that Raisin Bran has 38 carbs, which is like 9.5 teaspoons of sugar to their body. They just don't know. So I'm like, that sounds really, one lady had Raisin Bran, a banana, and orange juice, and I think I added up, it was like 92 carbs. And then once I divided that by 4, then she knew that, you know, what that was in sugar, teaspoons of sugar, it just blew her mind. And she's been doing this for years. And the rest of her diet was actually okay. She got rid of that one little thing, and her weight started going down.
That's
so
incredible.
It's really, you just have to be able to explain things in terms that people understand, which is why we want diversity of the message. We want different voices with different perspectives to reach audiences that we may struggle to reach. And that's what we're gonna continue to do, and encourage as many people as possible to take this journey with us.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that. We were talking a bit beforehand, and we're going to probably continue after we finish this interview, but you mentioned specifically the African-American community. And I was saying to you, I mean, we've had conferences. I don't think I've had more than 3, maybe 4 at any of the conferences. African-American
how many people? Yeah. So how many people at a conference?
So from 250 to 600.
Wow.
And you know, we've had one at one conference, and the last San Diego conference, I think there was 4. And they were all friends. I think they came together. So it was really only one person effectively, you know what I mean? It wasn't like a bunch of different, discrete different people that came. And so we need to understand why that is. And fix it so that we are able to serve that community as well. And so that's part of what I'm going to talk with you about. Somebody actually pointed out to me at one point when you know, because I've been talking about this for a long time, was like, but you don't have any African-American speakers on the stage.
Right.
So, and I think that, and it was like, that was like a
light bulb.
A light bulb. It's like, duh.
Yeah.
That just makes so much sense. But, so that's where we've got to start, you know, get some representation there to start.
I don't even see on Twitter, which is why I love, like I said, you're my brother from another mother, because, you know, I got my Twitter family that's growing, and I do not follow any person of, you know, African-American that I respect like you on Twitter, because I need to, they may be out there, but I don't see them.
You just don't know about them. Yeah. So that's what we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Starting with you. Okay. You obviously, we're doing an event in August, which is either going to be live in San Diego. It's going to be virtual, depending on whether they allow us to go ahead. But either way, you know, we're going to have you there as a speaker, and possibly some people that what we need to do is go out there and try and find people that know what they're talking about, that are part of that community, so that we can embrace them. I'm very excited about that. I honestly, for years now, I've been trying to work out what are we doing wrong. What are we doing wrong that we're not attracting these people?
We're gonna dive deeper and figure it out. When I was part of this whole lean and Toyota model with our operating system, one of the things I learned is that you have to get to the root cause. And one of the examples that they talked about was, they were having, I can't remember exactly, but there was some issues with this monument. It kept having like bird poop on it, right? And so they were trying to figure out, why is there bird? They thought it was the lights, right? So the obvious answer is the lights. But what they found is that it really wasn't the lights. It was something else. And I can't remember exactly how the story went, but you have to ask why, and then you have to ask why again, and you keep peeling that layer back, and then you'll find out. So it may just be because they need to see people they're familiar with, right? But it may be other factors that maybe they are more aligned with guidelines, and when you say keto, they just like freak out, you know? So I don't know what it is, but what we have to do is we have to have testimonies, like that video with Mamie Daniels that's on YouTube, where she testifies, loses 105 pounds within a month, you know, a year or so, and was in a walker and now she's basically barely needing a cane. I think they need to see stories, and we need to share the, you know, the science in a way that's palatable. But I want all of us to live a long, happy life and be here for our families. But the communities of color, the statistics are mind-boggling, even with the coronavirus, in terms of how it disproportionately affects people. So we know this is a game changer. And I've taken so many people off medicine, including insulin, that it's kind of just normal business.
Yeah, but it's ridiculous that it can. I mean, Brian, who's the guy that introduced us, I mean, he came to our event in 2017 and was also trying it on himself, had success, but didn't want to take it to his patients until he came to the conference and heard all these other scientists and doctors talking about it.
That's
and
right.
he went back and started the next day, that Monday, he started being prepared to speak to them. And, you know, he said to me, Doug, in all my 20 years or whatever of practice, I never, ever took a single patient off insulin.
Wow.
And yet
Well,
in the last 5 months since your conference, because he reached out to me, you know, later, I hadn't even met him at the conference. He said, 5 months since your conference, I've taken 11 patients completely off insulin.
It's mind-boggling.
So
nobody would believe it.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Type 2 diabetes is a dietary disease, and if you have type 1, you will not be taking a lot of insulin. If you are
correct, you could be controlling it much better if you were.
Yeah, it's just easier. So, but we've always been taught it's a chronic and progressive disease. We've never been taught. And when I was actually going to say cure. When I wrote that book, I was going to say, instead of reverse diabetes, I was going to say cure, but I thought that was a little too strong. Because ultimately, if you stop eating this way, it will come back. But at the end of the day, we were never taught that was possible. So, but it's almost like a herd mentality. And I have to be careful even in low carb space. I don't want to get so caught up in my low carb mentality that I'm still blind. So if I hear a Dr. McDougall or a Dr. Orange put something out there, I'm going to try to read it with a neutral eye.
With an open mind, yeah.
What are they saying? Because you never know. And by the way, there are people who will be successful with those approaches, period. So I don't have a problem with that. But at the end of the day, we know that sugar, starch, and excessive grains are not, first of all, essential nutrients. And there's some phytonutrients in vegetables that we need for sure. But in terms of essential and preventing diabetes and obesity, you don't have to eat a banana or some grapes to be healthy. You just don't. Even the smoothie that I'm going to make today, if it didn't have berries in there, there's some phytonutrients and antioxidants, going back to that statement, that would add value. But in terms of just being able to live and be on this planet, they're not essential. So I think that we have to just be honest about that and know that there are certain things that you have to be careful with that may harm you. And if I decide to eat things that are not aligned with this vision, that's okay too. But at the end of the day, I've never felt better. I've never been sharper. I have not eaten today, and I think it's in Chicago time, it's almost 3 p.m. in a little bit. And I haven't had nothing to eat, and I feel phenomenal. Who'd have thought? My mom when I first started doing fasting, shout out to my mom. She was like, "What are you doing?" And I think that, and I'm okay with that, but I just think that people need to understand that you can't argue with the results. And when I look at my cholesterol and those numbers that we were supposed to care about, all those numbers look better. Nothing got worse. Everything got better. The triglycerides plummeted. The HDL went up. The LDL went up a little bit, then it went back down. Everybody's different. I feel phenomenal. I'm not, even when I get off this conversation, I'm gonna have my smoothie just because it's time to have the smoothie. I'm still not hungry. Right. It's just a bizarre existence. So, and I just don't want to go back to being a sick person. Stomach problems, tired, stressed.
We all like that. It's like, I think that's the thing. That's why there's so many people who want to become keto coaches or low carb coaches, because they just cannot believe how much better they feel and how they just can't believe it. And then they feel obliged to try and teach other people about it.
Tell everybody. Yeah, and it's hard to hold it in, and
Yeah.
so I have to be careful that you have family members, and your job is not to fix everybody. So but when you become known in that space, people will ask questions anyway. But so I kind of let them come to me. They know what I mean. They'll be aware. By the way, I'm doing a podcast. By the way, I'll be on this interview or whatever, and they know what you're doing, so they will ask questions. But I try not to get preachy. But it is hard because you almost have tears in your eyes. I think I had heard your story. I looked at an older podcast, and you shared some of your story about family.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something. It's hard not to want to fix folk. It's hard when you love them that much and you want them to be here and to be healthy and to have energy and maintain their mental clarity. It's hard to not want to just force that into them.
Yeah, you know, and I think that was the thing. It's like, I even said in that testimonial type thing that I don't care if I've got over it. If people don't want to listen to me, it's okay. Hopefully one day you'll learn that this is what for you, and you can come back and learn at that point. But when it's your family, that is what, you know, because you know you can help, but they just won't listen. It's devastating.
It's almost like when you think about how we need more people in this space, right? In this low carb. I don't even know if my family, to the extent, even in my health system, right? Board certification in obesity medicine, for example, I don't know what the number is, but it's just over 3,000 in the entire country. So you have 3,000 docs who are board certified in the specialty that deals with the #1 health condition, right? I don't think my family fully appreciates the slightly more level of information that's in your brain that can help them. They just don't. So now the good, and I had to kind of let go of some of that. So it's very hard to do that. But I also believe in my spirit that over time, there will be enough people that'll kind of get by, and you just don't want it to be too late, you know? So I think we have to just control our controllables and just help as many people as we can.
Exactly. So
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there. I have one last question, I think. And you mentioned in the beginning that you started out, or you were a vegetarian.
Yes.
Do you still stick with that? Are you still a vegetarian, but now just low carb, high fat, or have you moved on from that?
You know, they're gonna put. I remember it was I think it was a little dog, and they had the bacon commercial for the dog, and bacon. Now it was actually a pretty. You know, before I got into this vegetarian life, my favorite meal was an Italian beef. You know, with peppers, dipped. You know, in this juice, and so once I recognized now what I do is I do a beef bowl, because I don't want the bread, right? So there's a place called Bueno Beef in the Chicago area, and they sell a beef bowl, and I'll get a side salad, no croutons, and I'll use a fatty dressing like a ranch. So I still get that Italian beef and stuff, but the bottom line is that I did go back to the meat once I recognized that wasn't the real concern, and it was a nice return back to that.
Yeah.
But because I was a vegetarian for 8 years, I learned how to cook a lot of vegetables in a tasty way.
Right.
So I was already doing, zucchini pastas or whatever. I was doing that type of stuff. So for me, it was kind of nice to have that experience, so that as I transitioned back to eating animals, I was able to still have very interesting,
tasty vegetables.
Yeah, tasty. It's really easy. I don't know. People say keto and low carb can be hard. It's too easy for me. Like, it's the easiest. Exactly. I can eat ribs, just no barbecue sauce. I mean, that's not a.
No. How hard is that? Like, really?
It's just not.
And you know, I am of the opinion that this omnivorous kind of situation is the most ideal. But I'm even tending more towards the carnivorous side. I still love avos and a couple of other things, but I'm eating less and less vegetables.
Yeah.
But what I really, really try to strive for is not to alienate anybody.
Yes.
So if people have religious reasons or ethical reasons or whatever for feeling that they need to be vegetarians or they need to be vegan, I don't want to argue with them about that or tell them that they're wrong or judge them about that. All I want to say is if you recognize that you need to cut the carbs and increase healthy fats and saturated fats in your diet, then come and be a part of this conversation, and we will try and, it's going to be harder. Then it is a bit harder. Now it is difficult.
Yeah.
But it can be done. And so let's rather help you do that than alienate you and say, oh, you don't eat meat and you don't fit in this society. That's
well, I think that we have to, because how are we going to do double-blind studies? Nutrition science is so tough. I mean, that's why we use epidemiological studies. That's why it's difficult for us to be strongly moving forward with the approach that it's the only approach. One thing I learned about and with the University of Western States, well, I'll give them full credit for this, is that they talk about how all of these factors that harm us can affect our genome and our genes, right? And what's very clear is that some of us have a genetic predisposition to being insulin resistant, where some of us don't. I think in an ideal state, and I know there's companies trying to do this now, we do a genomic study. We look at what your genes are saying about what you can and can't eat. We already know that most people are going to be insulin resistant, but let's just say there's a pocket of people who, let's say 20% or not, maybe 30%. Then they may have more wiggle room to do some of the things that they want to do, if you want to call that the fun stuff. But this is what's clear in my brain. I don't think sugar will ever be a health food, right? Like it'll never be a health food. So no matter whether you can tolerate gluten or whatever, there's certain things that are probably not going to be a health food. So no matter where we end up, we do. But what I like about what you're saying is, and you're like me, there's some people out there they're just like almost rude with their feedback, right? And for me, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that, because what allowed you to become who you are is based on your life experiences. So I can't demonize you because you got to where you are because of that, and your belief systems are built on that. So my job is to be able to hear you and to see you and to respect you while expecting the same thing in return. And if we don't, we can agree to disagree on what's the best model. If you're doing something that's getting you results, then I'm fine with that. I just know that when I started doing this low carb, high fat thing for the communities of color that I serve, it's like everything just changed. And all of a sudden, this doctor from the west side of Chicago, no smarter than anybody else, was getting results that my colleagues weren't getting. And it's not because I'm smarter, it's just because I was willing to try a different path. And I just maybe I got lucky, but I just looked at science, and the science to me is just like that Banting diet that's been around since the 1800s. This stuff has been around forever. So we just have to learn enough to be dangerous, do a little bit of a pilot, see how it goes. And for the patients that it works for, and for me, it's like the majority, people are just doing so well. And I just want to, what Dr. Berry's wife told him, and he shared with me, is that she said, well, how many people did you see today, Doc? And she talking to her husband. He said, about 20 or so. She said, well, if you were doing this, if you were spreading your message to more people, how many people can you help? And that was kind of a wake up moment for me. Like, we can help more people if we just use these tools. I want to live in San Diego. I told Dr. the doctor who referred you to me.
Let's get Brian.
Yeah. I said, I want to live in San Diego. I like the weather, but at the end of the day, I don't have to be in San Diego to have a conversation with you. And maybe somebody in Alaska will hear this, or somebody in Europe somewhere. So we need to get this message out and just let people know that you're not alone. We care, and we will coach you to another way. And I really appreciate what you guys are doing. Coaching may be more important than anything, because people need just somebody to kind of hold their hand.
Yeah, there's definitely a need. There are the odd people, and I probably fall into that category, where once I believe in something, and as an engineer, I understand it and it all makes sense, I will just work out how to do it, and I'll do it. But most people need some kind of hand-holding, some level of hand-holding, different levels for different people.
Right.
But they all require some kind of somebody to challenge them. That was a word that you mentioned before, and someone to hold them accountable. You know, where they sometimes if they're not accountable to somebody, then they tend to drift much easier.
That's right.
So,
yeah,
I'm excited about this. I really, we're just getting it off the ground, but I really believe like there's a real need for it, and we've gone through all the content and certified it as well to make sure that it's up to standard. So we're excited about that. I'm excited about getting involved with you and doing more.
Yeah, we're gonna make this happen. It's time. My kids are
it is.
They don't need dad like they did in the past in terms of day to day. So this is a good place for me. And you just wake up one day and say, why was I born? And I was born to do this type of work. I just figured it out. And I'm just so thankful that I was redirected through my research to see the world differently.
Yeah, there's a whole long quote by Winston Churchill about that people are born to do something.
Yeah.
And when they accept that challenge and they take it on, they find greatness. And that's exactly how I feel. I feel like everything I did, all the mistakes I made, all the challenges that I went through, everything that I did up to 4 or 5 years ago when I started this, prepared me to do this. And I think back on all these things that I went through, if there was one of those things that didn't happen to me back through my life, I wouldn't have been able to do this as well and probably not be successful at all. And I really feel like
the story you told about your family, it changes how you approach somebody else's family. Like your desire, and I just noticed from my heart, just hearing you talk about it, you don't just see another person or another follower. You see a person who's maybe the matriarch, or their role on this planet is so much bigger than just them being a person that needs your help. And I think that your experiences with those things, I can hear the passion in your voice. And so, and if I'm on the other end of your voice, I'm gonna feel confident that no matter what this guy's telling me, he really cares about me and he really wants me to be successful. So as we help people to work towards their ideal state, they feel comfortable that coach is in it for the right reasons. And so I appreciate that. And that's why even the way you're trying to kind of keep things without sponsorship, and I know that's a challenge, but I think that those types of commitments are really helpful for trust. And I'm going to try to do the same thing. So we'll see, how that goes, but I just think that's the right thing to do. So.
Yeah, man, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this, and look forward to where we're going to go together in the future. And
so
you're
coaching me with the work you're doing.
I think that's the thing. If we all can learn.
That's right.
A lot of things every day, not just one thing. And if we're open to that, then we're all going to grow. So thank you so much. And we'll be in touch soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, you take care. Enjoy the rest.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to an episode of the LowCarbUSA podcast. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/LowCarbUSA.